Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the last program of the spring series. My name is Ariane, and I work for the Ottawa Public Library. For those who've been with us for the previous three series, this one today is going to be a little bit different because today's session is formatted like an online workshop or classroom to teach you and show you a demonstration of hands-on tips and tricks. So we will be demoing specific thing we talked about in the last three sessions. If you haven't been with us, don't worry, you'll be able to follow anyway, that's not a problem, and you'll be able to access the last sessions on the Ottawa Public Library YouTube channel. So note that this is a practice teaching space, and if you brought your dog along, that's lovely. You can try everything as we teach them. However, this isn't a private or even a group class here. So unfortunately, we won't be able to take specific questions of like, am I doing this right? Or something like that. We won't have time for this. But if that's what you're looking for, you can definitely look into training schools and enroll in a class near you. But if you have general question, we'll answer them in the chat. You just write them in the chat and we'll get to them eventually. So without further ado, let me introduce you to this series expert and the owner of Rough House, Jonathan Sommer. John is a dog enthusiast and advocate. His dog family consists of Burley and Maybe. He has received training from the Animal Behavior College as a certified dog trainer, as well as certification from the Companion Animal Science Institute in Canine Nutrition. Jonathan is constantly learning and is continuing studies on dog behavior and positive training techniques. And you guys are lucky today because we also are welcoming a special guest, Annie Dubois. Annie is the lead trainer at the Rough House and is a positive reinforcement training enthusiast. Annie graduated with honors the Karen Pryor Academy as a certified training professional and dove headfirst into the world of dog training. She has her own dog with us today, Gus, who will be our gracious demo dog today. So let's all say hi to Gus as well. So Annie is a valued member of the Rough House who has designed and helped reinvent the training programs to reflect her high quality of knowledge and instruction. So please help me in welcoming Jonathan, Annie, and Gus. The floor is to you guys. Thanks.
I'm back. Good evening, guys. This is our first picture-in-picture demonstration, and we spared no expense with the effects. But hopefully you can get the gist of what we're getting across with half of me and all of Annie and Gus. It's part 4. Some of you may have been here for other sessions, and my goal today is to go through as much as I can about reviewing and demonstrating some of the basics we talked about through the previous 3 weeks. Those that joined us, week 1 was a pre-ownership discussion. So a lot of that won't be covered today, but it was, again, how do I prepare my household and family to bring a dog into the house and any of that prep that was needed. Now, week 2, we had to do what happens now that we've got a dog, whether it's an adoptive dog or a puppy, and how do we integrate that dog into our house? What are the first steps we need to do? And a lot of that is covered now. We're going to cover that today with handling, getting ready for grooming, and some basic training. Week 3, which is only 2 nights ago, we covered training fundamentals about what would you look for in a trainer, how to pick a trainer, and even some of the language we use in training. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, but I'm going to start out with a little bit of review from Wednesday night here, talking about the words that we're going to use so that we're clear in our demonstration. So we're going to start out about how to handle a dog. Again, doesn't necessarily mean picking them up, but how do we get our dog ready for the world in which other people are going to be handling our dog? How is it a safe and comfortable process for our puppy or our growing dog? And a lot of dogs find touch excellent on certain areas of the body, and they might oppose on other areas of their body. Some of the words we're going to use in terminology today is we're going to, again, go back to what luring means, or shaping. So Annie is going to show us quickly just a lure, as we're going to attach a treat to Gus's nose, maybe get him to stand up. Gus's nose is falling, boom. He followed that treat. So Annie didn't have to give Gus a command. She used the treat and Gus's sense of smell to lure him into a sitting position. So she shaped his behavior. So we're going to, again, revisit that word, luring. Next word that we're going to cover or use on a regular basis is marker. Now, hopefully everybody can hear this, but Annie doesn't use the word good boy with Gus. Annie's trained Gus to respond to the clicker. Let's do one more so everybody can hear that. So hopefully you could hear that. We talked about reasons around using a clicker instead of a voice marker, but ultimately they're the same thing. Okay, so good boy or good girl in your house equals click on this side. One more click. Perfect, awesome work, thanks Annie. And it's important to realize that those are synonymous. You can interchange good boy, good girl with the click. So Annie's marker is the click, and then our reward right now is the treat. Lots of treats. Do you have multiple types of treats, Annie?
I do.
Okay, we talked about that last time too, about how different value of treats can communicate how well Gus is performing with Annie. Okay, so she's communicating back by the amount of treats or by the type of treats that Gus really loves. Okay, so we just need to remember luring, our marker, and our reward. I think we're gonna be good to go. So you're going to find there's a lot of patterns in this and a lot of repetition, but that is the name of the game. Our approach to a lot of these desensitization or reprogramming exercises are going to be very similar. So you're going to see a pattern, and that's a good thing. Okay, so we're going to start out with handling a dog. Let's assume that Gus has never had his paws touched before. Okay, so Annie's going to start out by picking up Gus's paw and holding it for 1 second. She's going to mark it and reward. Now, Gus has been trained on this before, keep that in mind, but she's going to start out small. Hold it for 1 second, mark and reward.
Hang on. You gotta wait. Hang on.
There we go. Hopefully everybody saw that. A lot of dogs, when they're getting to know this, puppies included, will pull their paw back. It's an uncomfortable situation. But assuming that Annie's worked through some repetitions and Gus has gotten up to really expecting a 1 second hold, we're gonna move that up to a gentle squeeze now. Now, Gus has learned if he shakes a paw, he gets a treat every time. So we're gonna try and walk you through that like it is his first time. Now, as Gus gets more familiar with the squeeze, front and back, that's great. Annie's now gonna add time to the duration. So she's gonna up this to 2 seconds instead of 1. Mark and reward. Now, after you've done this 10, 20 times, we're gonna up the duration, and Annie's gonna do it for about 5 seconds. Mark and reward. Now, this may take you an afternoon to get up to 5 seconds, or this may take you a matter of weeks. Neither is incorrect. It depends on your dog's sensitivities to their feet. And it is extremely important because people are going to be touching his feet or her feet for the rest of their days, whether it be the veterinarian or absolutely the groomer or yourself when you're doing the nails. So we don't need a dog that fights us every time we touch their paws. Similarly, another sensitive point is going to be their ears. And we're going to repeat this process. So Annie's going to start out by touching Gus's ear for a second, marking and rewarding. Very simple, right? Reprogramming our dog's minds that something good happens when I allow human to hold my ear for a second. Now, your dog is going to have their ears cleaned. Depending on your dog's ears, it's going to depend on how frequently they have their ears cleaned. Floppy-eared dogs have to have their ears cleaned frequently. Okay? So Annie's again going to continue to work on and add a little squeeze, and she's going to mark and reward. The reason Annie wants to mark before rewarding is to say, yes, that was the behavior that I wanted, and provide a reward for it. And the reason we want to start small and work up to it is we want this to be a situation that our dog can handle. We don't want to jump right into holding their ear for 10 seconds because that might not be a successful practice. Okay? So we want our dogs to succeed here. We want this to be a slow and steady progress.
So if I can add one little thing, Gus has a history of having blisters in his ears because he has allergies. So you can see when I hold his ear, he holds still, and when his mouth is open, that means he's more comfortable. But sometimes when I go to grab his ear, you can see that he closes his mouth, and sometimes he'll lick his lips. Like, away. That means he's just a little bit uncomfortable, but that's really normal for him. We have to work quite hard on this. He's come a long way.
Excellent point. Showing signs of stress. So licking the lips is a common sign, so that's a great point. And he's going to again work her way up, like she's had to with Gus, to a point where she can hold Gus's ear, likely put something, a wet cloth in his ear, and clean those out. Make sure he can avoid ear infections. Or what did you say, accumulate blisters?
He had blisters in his ears, so we did have to treat those blisters with medication in his ears.
See, so again, we've gone over paws and ears. We're going to move on to the tail. So the tail is another sensitive area. Why would we have to touch the tail? Probably to assist them with something around the back end, if they ever needed it, such as cleaning, or if they ingest and expel something that they need a little bit of help with.
Also, thermometers at the vet.
Very good point. It's a subject dogs don't like talking about, but Annie brought up a great point, thermometers at the vet. Oftentimes with dogs at tails that are tucked, the vet has to lift them up and get in there.
Don't love it.
No, they don't love it. No, I don't blame them.
Last one, ready?
So as you guys have seen, our repetition continues. We build up the duration and the time that we hold the tail. And we do as
No more tail.
no more tail, yes. We do as much as the dog will allow us, and we come back to reconditioning or reprogramming the day after. They don't have to like this, I might add, but they have to allow us,
Yes.
right? The more you do it, the more comfortable it will be. Let's move on to around the muzzle and the mouth. Essential for teeth cleaning. Essential for the vets to look in our dogs' mouths, for you to look in their mouth. So didn't reach in his mouth to start, we're working up to that. Again, we're making it comfortable. She's just holding the muzzle for a second, marking and rewarding. If we've been following along here, we're gonna move up to 2 seconds. And let Gus know that what we're doing is not painful, something that he can possibly enjoy or certainly understand what we're trying to accomplish. And like I said, repetition is the key. I'm repeating the steps for paws, ears, tail, and mouth, but repetition also in practice, in theory. And he's gonna lift his lips now, which is a step towards getting in and touching our dog's teeth. Perfect. Just show you a few more times. And he's even added a cue. She's going to let Gus know where she's grabbing. She's added tail, she's added mouth. Now I'll put Annie on the spot. Besides teeth, what can we look at our dog's gums for overall health?
Well, you can look at the color of their gums. You can look to see if they've got built up gingivitis on their teeth. If their gums are red and inflamed, then it's possible that they have an infection or gingivitis, so it's causing irritation. Also, if your dog likes to chew on sticks, it's a good way to look to see if there's little bits of wood or if there's splinters in their gums. It can be somewhat uncommon, but it can happen. It's also a good way to see if they've got anything in there that could potentially need to come out, right?
Right, you can spot teeth that are not healthy. They're often discolored, right? Or gums that are inflamed, as Annie mentioned. But a healthy gum should look like a light to darker pink. That's what you're looking for. You can also identify a dog that is sick by the color of their gums. That might be a yellowish condition. So again, if you've got a dog that's lethargic, is not feeling well, discolored gums that are closer to a yellow might indicate something else is going on. Lastly, this is not necessarily Gus because we're going to ad-lib a little bit, but because of long-haired dogs, including the doodles that I've referenced being so relevant these days, so populated, we often use a chin grab. Now, Annie could have demoed with me because I have a longer beard than the dog, but she's going to touch Gus's chin. And that is a grooming grab to orient Gus's face. And we're going to go into this in a moment because that grooming grab, desensitizing dogs to what is happening, this is not a threatening grab, allows the dog to be safe around scissors. If you can imagine, if I protest a grooming grab, like Annie's demoing with Gus, and there's sharp scissors around my eyes, it could become a bad situation. So much like desensitizing our dogs to all that other touch, to help with the process, the grooming grab is also important if you have a longer haired dog. If you don't have a longer haired dog, it's less important. Just keep that in mind.
Even short haired dogs can learn it.
They can. Gus is doing so well right now. Moving on to part 2. And it parlays exactly like we were addressing the grooming grab, is getting our dogs ready for grooming. And we've gone through simple handling, but what happens when we start to introduce objects that are foreign to our dogs? And Annie's going to start by introducing a brush. And we're simply going to introduce the object. Show it to our dog, mark and reward. Meaning, our dog didn't run away or freak out. That's perfect. You're a good boy. Reward. And start to build up that confidence that the brush means good things, not scary things. Natural progression. After we get past the fact that our dog is not afraid of the brush, we're going to start to add contact for a second, mark and reward. As our blueprint goes, Annie's going to keep moving forward, adding duration. And as mentioned, Gus has gone through this already. And at home, you might need to do a second contact for 10 or 20 reps. And day 2, do 10 or 20 reps of 2 seconds. Day 3, 3 seconds, and you get the pattern. We want to work our way up as quickly or as slowly as our dog will go into allowing Annie to do a light brush through Gus's hair. And that is our goal. Short-haired dogs, long-haired dogs, curly-haired dogs, hair, fur, they all need a brush. So this would apply to any type of combing or brushing. Again, our blueprint is starting small, making sure it's positive, and working our way up so that we can functionally do a hairbrush.
So one of the ways that I know that Gus is still comfortable, even though I'm running through the steps fairly quickly, is that when I show him the brush and I touch it to his body, when I run it through his fur, he's still waiting for that treat. So he's not turning his head, he's not getting up, he's not shifting, he's not showing me that he's uncomfortable at this step. He just sits and he's waiting for that click and that treat because he knows that's what's coming next. But if he did start to shift in his seat or he started to give me a quick head turn, I would go back a step. to make sure that he's comfortable at the last step we were at. So maybe I would show him the brush again, maybe I would just touch him with the brush again, and then we would move forward again.
Great point. So a note here, with brushing your dog, your groomer, I am sure, would be ecstatic to show you which brushes or combs will help you upkeep your dog. And I can only stress how important that is, because some people like their dogs in a particular length. Upkeep is extremely important. Okay, so desensitizing our dog and then being consistent, maintaining their coat is really important. Ask your groomer, I'm sure they'd love to walk you through it. We're gonna move on to nail clippers, one of the scariest things that a dog will go through. And what I mean scary is that it's such a highly sensitive area. We spent our time desensitizing our dog's paws. So and I will start out by saying, unless you know how to do it, we're not going to be teaching you how to clip your dog's nails tonight. That's a much deeper conversation. The anatomy of the dog's nail becomes very, very critical that you do this properly, because you can cause pain, bleeding unnecessarily unless you know what you're doing. So I'm going to throw that disclaimer out there, but that doesn't mean we can't get them ready for it at home. Introducing a pair, even if it was a pair of small scissors, but Annie's going to get Gus comfortable by introducing a pair of clippers and just touching his feet. She's going to work through this repetition much like we did before, but I'm going to add in there that seeing dogs do their nails on a regular basis, if they are not conditioned, it can lead to a very difficult time getting your dog appointments to get their nails clipped. Groomers, us included, with extra sets of hands, can only do so much if a dog is completely opposed to having their nails done. And what that means is sedation and a vet visit to keep it safe. So if your dog can tolerate it and get better at it, this is really, really important. And what we're doing ultimately is working our way up to trimming the nails. But if Annie can get to this point, holding his paw, touching metal on nail for 3 or 4 seconds, we've done that job of desensitizing our dog's nails. Great job, Gus. And hopefully that makes sense to you guys out there. Next, we're going to dive into scissors. Yeah, this is a great training tip. More treats for Gus. That's right. So as Annie's loading up the bag, we're moving on to scissors, which are potentially the first of the tools that we have that can be dangerous to handle with a dog that opposes those scissors being close by. So we're going to start that process. But as you can imagine, scissors are needed a lot of different areas: around the paws, which we've already worked on, and around the face, around the ears. So around these sensitive areas, we want to really teach our dog that these scissors do not mean danger. I've got a great question here. I'll let Annie answer it. We got one from Allison that says, what kind and size of treats are you using? We want to do this, but we don't want to overfeed our puppy.
It's quality over quantity. So I will use pre-made training treats. Those are my medium value treats. But when you buy them at the store, see if I have a big one in my bag, they tend to come a little bit generous. Hold on. They're a little bit of a generous size. So I make sure to break them up into at least 4 pieces, so that it's the size of a pea or smaller. So even though they come in the bag as training treats, I make sure to cut them up either with scissors, or I'll put them on a cutting board with a knife. It's a little bit faster. So that all the treats that I'm giving are very small. That includes if you're using higher value treats. So if it's dehydrated beef liver, dehydrated chicken, if it comes in a big slab or a square, you want to put those on a cutting board and cut them up into tiny little bits. That way you can use high value food or medium value food, and you're not going to pack on the calories.
Great answer. Good, very good question too. And this is what I'll throw out there too, just because we're on the topic. Again, ideas for rewarding a non-food motivated dog. Feel like tackling that one?
So a non-food motivated dog, it can be a tricky concept. When you're working around a lot of distractions, you can use toys and play as a form of reinforcement for your dog. So for some dogs, toys are the most exciting thing on the earth. For some dogs, food is. However, usually if you have a dog that's not super excited about food, you can still use it at home, and when it's quiet and it's not super exciting, and get the fundamentals in. And then maybe you get creative once you're working around a lot of distractions in an area where there's things that are more interesting than food to that particular dog.
Perfect. So as we know, we can see that Annie is desensitizing Gus, adding duration and location to those scissors. We talked about scissors are not a one location tool. So we have to, again, teach Gus that these scissors are going to be around his eyes, his ears, his feet, his sanitary area, potentially. Again, all very sensitive areas. We're going to move on to one, and I'm going to group this together. I've got it listed as Dremel or clippers and hair dryers. For those of you out there, Dremel is a tool we use, which is not dissimilar to the Dremel you would buy at Home Depot, and it's a tool to grind your dog's nails closer to the quick. It allows us to shape them and get them shorter. It's a weird sensation. It's somebody like putting a vibrating toothbrush on your feet. It tickles. So we have to get our dogs used to that sensation. But I'm also going to group in clippers. Clippers have a louder motor on them. Clippers are a step louder. That can be frightening for the dog. One, to hear this sound the first time they're on a grooming table. Two, that vibration on their hair or their fur can also be scary. So I'm going to group the Dremel and a set of clippers together. And you can do the same exercise about desensitizing. So let's introduce the sound first, mark and reward. There you go. As mentioned, the Dremel's not overly loud, but it's a little bit louder to Gus. Okay. And Annie's going to do the same process. She's going to pretend that the Dremel is a clipper as well. She's going to get this close to Gus's feet. Click and reward. Yeah. We don't want to move too fast. Our next goal is to get the Dremel in contact with the foot. And Annie may have to handle his foot to do that. Good boy, Gus. So we've got this desensitization process, imitating everything else that we've done. And for what it's worth, let's almost assume that this is a hair clipper. So Annie's going to want to do the same process, but we know we're going to have to be able to touch Gus's back, his neck, his chest.
That's never been shaved. This is new.
This is new. We're getting real-time training here with Gus, because Gus is not a dog that requires a regular haircut. All right, so that process remains the same. And Gus, again, is being extraordinarily patient as a demo dog. We applaud him. The last noise tool that I'll throw into the loop there that you're going to want to desensitize at home is a hair dryer. A hair dryer is the loudest of the three, if not the scariest. You've got the ghost of this air that's shooting out of nothing, hitting your dog. We find that it is the most stressful thing for a dog being groomed, not the water, but often the hair dryer. And the thing about hair dryers at the groomers is that the hair dryers at the groomers are higher pressure and louder than your hair dryers at home. So we'll do what we can do. But what Annie's doing now is if she had a hairdryer, she would repeat that process and allow Gus to get used to it as much as possible. I got a great question from Jill, is how can I introduce a Dremel to my dog without buying one to prepare her for the groomer?
I have a magic trick for that. An electric toothbrush. That is the perfect replicator of a Dremel. Obviously take the head that goes in your mouth off the toothbrush, pro tip. But when you turn on the electric toothbrush, it makes a very similar sound. I assume the mechanics are quite similar on the inside of the machine. So you can introduce a similar shaped object, a similar sound, as well. It is going to make a minor vibration when it touches their body. It may be a little bit less intense than the Dremel that your groomer has, or the Dremel that you may end up buying, but the concept will be there, and it won't be so novel when your dog actually has a Dremel that gets used on them. If you don't have an electric toothbrush, you can use a razor with the head taken off, if you have someone that has a handheld razor in the house. But again, take the head off, no mistakes there. Yeah, anything that'll vibrate like that. I know that there is an app that you can use to make your phone vibrate. The electric toothbrush is a little bit more real life in terms of what it looks like, but you can get creative as far as that goes.
Awesome. So last little bit, we got one comment from Donna, which we'll tend to, is special procedures or considerations for fear biters. Donna, I think that groomers have a lot of tools that we don't have at home. If your dog is extremely fearful, restraints are going to be needed. Practice and probably talk with a trainer about how to approach that and not make the fear worse. So that is a great comment, because if we are seeing the desensitization process go the opposite direction, I think that is time to reach out and talk with somebody to help you with that.
What I will say, the only other comment I have about that, these processes start without any contact with the dog at all. So you saw me do it with the nail clippers, the brush, and the Dremel. I hold it away from the dog and introduce the item without any contact, so that you can start at a step that's long above and before we get to biting, so that your dog can understand even just the item is a good thing.
All right, so moving on to our last section, I'm going to vacate most of the screen to Annie and Gus, but I guess commentate from the side. I'm going to move the screen a little bit so we can see the bench. And the important part of this is to review some of the training fundamentals we spoke about. It's really hard for us to go into anything too advanced or too detailed because we only have 45 minutes today, but getting some of the basics down that we've already alluded to today, being luring, shaping, and timing, are going to be key. So I'm going to slide out to the side. We're going to let Annie start out. We're going to start out with simple luring, which we've already done, but we're going to get Gus back into a sit, and then we're going to advance to a more complicated lure, which might be something like walking in circles around the top of the bench. Gus is following Annie. It's a tight spot. It's a tight spot. He put it in reverse.
You tried. Okay, do it again. Good.
And she marked it. Now, maybe we can lure Gus into a down just to show everybody. Okay. Just because I like putting Annie on the spot, it's what I do. I'm going to throw this out to her, and I want her to talk to why luring is not just an exercise, but it's a skill to work on.
So luring can be a great way to get a behavior started when you're first teaching your dog something that you want them to do. So when we're using a lure to teach, have to go get it. When we're using a lure to teach, it can be a good way to communicate to your dog, this is the position I want you to be in. Because as soon as you get them into that position, that's when you can mark it so that they can understand what it is you're asking them to do. As we go forward with behaviors, we fade our lures so that we don't need food in our hands to accomplish behavior. But it can be a great way to get your dog to move. Good boy. It can be a great way to get them excited about the food during a training session. And it can be a really nice way to get them to get into the position you need them to be in, to give them the opportunity to learn that's what I'm supposed to do.
And throwing it out there, learning more complex behaviors, like how you might use it in agility or tricks.
Sure. So when we're teaching tricks or we're doing agility, using a lure can be a great way to communicate to your dog, keep going. So if, let's say, I wanted Gus to learn how to beg, that's an easy trick to teach using a lure, because I can lure him up like I would to get him into a sit, but if I keep luring him up, he's gonna start hippie hopping off the ground because he wants to follow that treatment. Good. And then once his feet start coming off the ground, that gives me an opportunity to mark it so that he can understand his front feet are supposed to come off the ground. But while we're doing this process, good, all he has to do is follow food. So it keeps it nice and fun. And once I feel like Gus understands that he needs to take his feet off the ground, then I can talk about taking the lure out of my hand and seeing if he'll do it.
All right, so quick question. So Brad mentions obviously Gus is trained.
Yes. Not gonna lie, Gus is trained.
How do you suggest doing this with a puppy that moves around a lot?
So the really important thing about using a lure, especially when you first start out, is to go nice and slow. So when I'm using a lure, I have, hang on 2 seconds, mister. I have the treat pinched between my fingers, with maybe just a little bit of it exposed, so that we've got smell and maybe a little bit of taste. I'm gonna stick that lure to the dog's nose and go as slowly as I have to get him to keep following it. Because we have a tendency to go a little bit quickly, especially when the dog wants to move quickly. But if I go too fast, I can lose their attention if they didn't have enough practice. So you want to stick it right to the nose and go nice and slow, like so.
So, and then Brad, you just had a quick question. So it was around the marker, and what to use instead of the clicker is your voice.
Yeah, so Gus has another marker. If I don't have a clicker, I use the word yes. So if I tell him yes, he also knows that he got it right. So, yes, and then I reward.
So whatever you designate as your marker, good boy, good girl, yes, is synonymous with the clicker. You can exchange those.
Yes.
For our demonstration, the clicker is Annie's yes. Quick comment on timing. I'm going to jump back in the picture. Last conversation we had about training fundamentals was around if you took 1 or 2 points from our discussion, it was going to be around when you execute your marker. That timing is critical. So a quick demonstration that if Annie's teaching Gus something new and her communication to Gus is her marker, why the timing is so critical. I'm going to have you demonstrate whatever you would like to show why that is a critical move.
So I am in the process of teaching Gus a new trick. What I want him to do is put both of his paws on my arm. So what I need to do at this stage is communicate to him that I don't need one foot, I need both. So I need to make sure that I only click my clicker when his second foot is on my arm. Otherwise, he's going to think 1 foot is enough.
Okay.
So that was a perfect example because on that first repetition, I only had the 1 foot and I'm trying to get him to consistently give me the second foot. So if he got lost, if he got confused, which happens, I simply took my arm back and tried again. And on that second repetition, I got the second foot. And the important part is that I clicked as soon as I had his second foot on my arm. That way he knows for sure that the second foot is exactly what he needed to do and that that's how he's going to get this treat.
Now let's demo for devil's advocate's sake. Let's see you click at the wrong time and what might that communicate to Gus. So Annie just clicked when one paw hit the arm.
Now we have no paws.
No pause.
Ready? So now it's going to take him longer to put that second foot up. Because on the first repetition, what I communicated to him was 1 foot is enough. So that was another perfect example, because he knows he's supposed to put 2 feet, because we're working towards that. But I clicked when I had the 1 foot, and he actually hesitated to put his second foot there, because I'm communicating 1 foot is enough, when really I'm trying to communicate that I need 2. So, because he doesn't speak English, the only way I'm going to make that clear for him is if I click at the right time. I know it's a lot of training. Good.
There you go. Conversely, if Annie's not early and she's late and Gus is taking his paws off, she's then communicating what she wants is Gus to take his paws off her arm. So as an example, being accurate with your marker is really, really critical. Again, whether that's your voice or a clicker. We got one more question we'll tend to with the training. And it was, do you assign the command word right away or do you wait a bit? I'll let Annie take that.
That's an excellent question. So it depends what you're working on, but what we want to see when we're training a dog is we want to build the behavior to look like what we want the final result to be. So in the case of, let's take this trick for an example. I have a couple of steps that I need to run through before it's going to look the way I want it to look. Because this trick is about teaching him to perch both feet on my arm. But we're still in the training process. So until he can consistently put 2 feet on my arm, I don't add a word to it yet. I don't add a cue. Because I want the cue to mean put both feet on my arm. I don't want the cue to mean put 1 foot, wait a while, think about it, and then put your other foot up. I want to make sure that when he hears the cue, he understands what he has to do. So we want to build our behaviors and shape our behaviors to look the way we want them to look before we put a word on it. The other reason that we do this is to make sure that the dog is learning one thing at a time. They can only intake so much information in a minute, just like a human being. So if I was asking him to do something, clicking and putting words at him all at the same time, when he doesn't actually know what he's doing yet, that can be really confusing. So to keep it simpler for him and for you, focus on building the behavior you want. Once it looks great 9 out of 10 times, which we can get into in a second, then you can put your cue on it.
Awesome, Annie. Thank you. You're welcome, Allison. And lastly, we did spend a little longer on training, so we're not going to dive into what we had planned around the brain games, but I think what Annie can probably confer with me on this is that with the brain games or any type of training is mental stimulation for your dog. And you can make it as fun or challenging as you want. Train or stimulate in short bursts versus long sessions. Keep their interest, make it fun. But as an example, just simply around luring and shaping behavior, you can use that to create any type of games you want at home. Whether that means doing a figure 8 through your legs, crawling under a chair, luring you around in a circle around the coffee table, like Annie's doing right there. That lure can be a real stimulating game and lead to a lot of other fun training stuff. So as far as brain games at home, you can be creative and use these simple skills to engage your dog. I think that's pretty much it. Ariane, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I see there's a question by Lindsay that said, how long should or could you use luring with food to get the dog to do what we want to do? So is there a time when we should stop that or not really?
Yeah, so Annie, I'll relay that to you. So how long should we lure with food to get the dog to do what we want to do? Is there a time we should stop?
Yes.
We have a young hound I think because he's so stubborn, we might be using luring for a long time to get him to do almost everything.
That is a common question and a common issue in dog training. What I use the lure for is just to establish the position. Once the dog can get into the position, so if it can follow the lure 5 times in a row and get into that position, and you've marked it 5 times in a row, so you've said yes for good boy, good girl 5 times in a row. You want to start doing it without food in your hand. The trick to doing this so that your dog understands it's still worthwhile to do this, when I'm luring, I tend to have a hand like this, a little duck face. So if I'm going to use duck face hand, I don't have any food in it. So I can lure him like this, mark, and then reward. So that we can bridge that gap between you still want the dog to go into the position you're trying to accomplish, but the food is going to come after. So then the dog still wants to do the thing and still gets paid. I think that answers your question. Feed your lures as fast as you can. That's what I'll say.
Amazing. I think that's all the question we had in the chat for sure. And that's the time we had for the videos as well and the training. Thank you so much, Jonathan, Annie, and a special thank you to Gus.
And Gus, yeah.
You did fantastic today. Boy, maybe, I hope one day my puppy will get to be that well trained. We'll see. Today definitely will help me with that. So that's all for today's program. Thank you so much for joining us for all of the 4 sessions of the spring series. And thank you once again to Annie, Jonathan, and Gus for demoing to us today. We hope you enjoyed. We hope you found it interesting. This was the last program of the Spring Pet series, but stay tuned because there is talks of maybe doing a fall series later this year. Maybe diving more in depth in some of those specific subjects and pet first aid and all of that thing. So stay tuned and keep your eyes peeled for that. But until then, take care of yourself, of your family, and all of your furry friends. And thank you for joining us. Bye.